Welcome to another episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. Today, we are going to take a journey into technology, cybersecurity, and a little bit of a focus into the Department of Defense. So stay tuned for another episode of Daring to Transcend. So today I am really excited to introduce my guest, Cherisa Jerez, who is the Vice President of Operations and co-founder of Ashire Technologies and Services, a company specializes in cybersecurity support for federal information systems. Sounds like kind of an important thing to do. She co-founded the company with her husband, and together they are focused on growing their team and supporting multiple projects within the Department of Defense. They currently provide team members to provide dedicated cybersecurity support to government systems in Dayton, Ohio, and Colorado Springs, Colorado. Cherisa was recently acknowledged as one of the top 50 women leaders in Orlando just this year. So welcome, Cherisa. I am so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Karen. I am so excited to be here.
So I know you have a really interesting story because you didn't just start out in this technology field. You took a little bit more of a detour to get here. So I would love for you to tell us about your story.
I did. In fact, I feel that everything has built and culminated in this moment, but I have definitely taken a lot of curves on this journey. So I think it would be remiss for me not to say that first and foremost, I am a very proud Latina. So I am a first-generation American on my father's side who immigrated to this country from Havana, Cuba, and a third generation on my mother's side who we teasingly call a West Side Story baby because she was born in the Bronx to an Irish father and a Puerto Rican grandmother. My grandmother was Puerto Rican, her mother. So I have a very eclectic mix even at the gene level, and I think that has fed my stories in many ways. I am originally from Miami, Florida. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, on the border of Mexico, and so actually from the area that I lived, I mean, you could see the Rio Grande and you can see Mexico and the stores in Mexico just past the river, and I think that was very interesting dynamic for me growing up because we didn't grow up with much. And so I really was not inspired throughout my community to think beyond growing up to maybe get a state level job or, something that would provide benefits. It's just really the nature of that environment at times could be very limiting. And I was very blessed that I loved to read. I was an avid reader from the time I was very young. I was like in the spelling bees and a really serious student. And the world of books really opened up my world. And, with my grandfather being in New York, they were sending me all the classics and I got opportunities to travel. And so it just fed this ambition and this desire to do more than what maybe initially I thought I'd be able to do in my community. And so I graduated from the University of Texas, El Paso a long time ago with a degree in accounting. I got my bachelor's degree in accounting, and I did that because I asked, what could I study that would allow me to wear a suit and carry a briefcase and work in a big building? That was like the criteria.
Okay, so wait a minute. I'm just gonna pause you to ponder there because I've got a question to ask about that.
Yes.
Which character, which book inspired that need to carry the wear a suit and carry in the briefcase?
I was reading a lot of Danielle Steele novels when I was like 12 and 13 years old. And she's always had these like powerful women that were, off conquering the world. So I think that was probably a culmination of a couple of her characters.
I love that. Okay, continue, please.
Yes. So fortunately, my advisors at school realized I had a knack for numbers. While I was a very creative spirit, I had a strong ability in math and science and reasoning. And so they recommended accounting and assured me that I would wear the suit and work in the big building and carry the briefcase. Except that when I finished college and it was time to sit for the CPA exam, I decided I was just too much personality to stick myself into that cubicle for a couple of years and work my way up. Like there was just too much energy happening. And so I did a little bit of soul searching and decided that I was going to join the Army. And it was 2003 when I graduated college. So it was quite the time to decide to serve my country.
Yeah.
So, 9/11 impacted me significantly. I was in the university when that happened. And I wanted to wear a uniform. I wanted to be part of the team. I had really no military experience or exposure growing up. And so it just felt like the right next step. And
that is an incredibly courageous decision. And so, yeah, you talk about taking a sharp turn in one direction or another. That's a pretty sharp turn from like an accounting to
the Army.
The Army. So what did you do in the Army?
Well, I actually commissioned as a signal officer. So that was really my first exposure into the world of IT, which when they told me I was going to be a signal officer, I had no idea what that meant. And I was like, what's a signal officer?
I don't know what that means either. So
you're going to work in IT. And then I thought, well, that's good because people make a lot of money when they work in IT. So the Army's going to really ensure that I've got that suit and that briefcase. And so I went for it. And the funny thing was that I joined in a program called OCS, the Officer Candidate School College Option. So that meant that the likelihood that I would be accepted like directly from college into this program was, I think, there was like a 10% selection rate. And so the recruiters told me at the time, you're better off just enlisting and then trying to make the transition once you're in uniform. And I said, 10%, those are much better odds than I've ever had in my life. I'm going to take them. And I got in. So that started.
It was very.
Yes, it was definitely meant to be. And I think that when I talk about these things really culminating into where I am today, this was 2005 when I shipped off to basic training, and I did basic training for 9 weeks and then went off to OCS and did that for 14 weeks. And it was about a year of total training. But I had a foundational background already in finance and accounting. I understood numbers. I knew I was very drawn to business, and I knew that analytical and that ability to process numbers, and yet the extroverted personality and the gumption and the kid that's always in the front row with their hand raised, that these things would work together for me at some point. And the Army really brought both an initial exposure to IT, but leadership during wartime. And so I had never led teams prior to, arriving at my first duty station as what they call a butter bar, a second lieutenant. And thank God for the Army, because they really do leadership right. And they teach you about servant leadership and taking an interest. And when you're in charge of a team, initially my first team was an all-male platoon. I was the only female, and getting them ready to deploy in a rapidly deployable unit, that's just a different level of leadership and a different level of experience with a team. And so I was very blessed that for those 3 years that I served on active duty, it's funny, I asked to join the Army to go see the world, and they stationed me right back in El Paso at Fort Bliss. So I went right back home, and I was able to get my MBA during that time as well. So those 3 years were really beneficial for me. But I knew I got married during that time. My husband was a career serviceman. I met him at OCS, and he already had 9 years of service. And so when we were looking at the dynamic between two officers and our family, it really just made sense for me to make the transition at that point with only 3 years in. And so I went to serve in the Army Reserves, and I moved into corporate America, and I took my first job in Puerto Rico at Boston Scientific on the manufacturing floor. And so that was kind of like the next major milestone in my career and in my trajectory. I've got this shiny MBA. I'm finally, and now this is kind of a funny story, and I think for women in business, they'll laugh, but, being in a uniform for 3 years meant no makeup, right? It was bun and my uniform and trying to prove myself in a very male-dominated environment during wartime. So when I got my first job in medical device, I went to the mall to one of the expensive, makeup counters and spent an ungodly amount of money. And then I get to the factory, and it's a med device clean room factory in Puerto Rico, and they're like, no makeup.
Oh, no.
Any makeup at all. That was fun. So I put everything back in the drawer and dove into this world of engineering and manufacturing and balancing and numbers, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then being in Puerto Rico for the first time in my life was such a beautiful experience. It taught me so much about the island, about the culture on my mother's side and my grandmother and her family. And so it was just a really beautiful experience. Serving in the Army in Puerto Rico at Fort Buchanan was incredible. And that really began in 2008. And so I stayed in manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution until 2020. So it was 12 years of really growing my career. Now, as a military wife and a mother, I had to do a lot of moving, and I was very blessed that every time we were, stationed somewhere else, my roles and responsibilities continued to increase as I was looking for work.
Okay, so you stayed with the manufacturing, but not necessarily with the same company as you moved around.
Yeah.
And so how easy was it for you to make those transitions? I taught a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with a woman named Bryn Amon, who was also a military wife, and she, spent a lot of time networking in order to make those transitions when she moved. What was your secret sauce for continuing to keep your career going?
Yeah, I wish I could say I had a really powerful network. I did not. Unfortunately, I did not. And so I really just scoured the job sites. And fortunately, I had really strong references from where I had just left. And I think that helped as well. But it was really just being, I was at the right place at the right time in the right moment. And, maybe a little bit of divine intervention, but it worked out. Every time I landed at a new place, it was like, well, this is a promotion opportunity. And so in 12 years, I went from starting as a production supervisor on the floor building medical devices and heart failure devices. In 12 years, I was running a medical device factory in Dublin, Ohio. And we were like a sub-assembly plant for the entire world. And I had the entire global distribution network. Well, I'm sorry, the North American distribution network for the company. So I was responsible for 4 warehouses in the US and 1 in Canada. And most people, especially in med device is a very competitive industry. It tends to be very oriented to the relationships that you've built and the context that you have. And to make it from, where I started to where I ended in that industry in 12 years is pretty unheard of.
Well, that sounds pretty, it sounds like one of the things that I'm hearing you say in all of this, and this goes back to something you made earlier, that wanting to, ability to raise your hand, right? And say, I want this, even though maybe this is a little bit bigger job than the last one I had, I'm going to go for it anyway. It sounds like that raising your hand serves you very well during this time.
Yes. Yeah, because there was never a time when I went from one organization to another that I had a lot of experience in the new role. So almost every time I was either diving into an industry I had no background in, whether I was going from med device to high voltage instrument transformers to aerospace components. Like I'd never done that before. And in almost every case, I had never done it at that level before. And so, I have a mantra, why not me? Why not me? And that has served me well because I've never been afraid. I've always believed that if you want to learn something, And if you're willing to listen more than you talk, you will learn it and you will excel. And
Absolutely. I just love that. And I talk to so many women who, we still see women who don't raise their hand, who basically say, well, I haven't done that before, so I'm not qualified.
yeah,
And it's so not true.
right.
And I love that you just dove in and said, okay, wait a minute, these are my transferable skills. Like I know how to do all these things. And so what if it's a different industry, or so what if it's a different level? I still have the base knowledge and I've got the ability to learn. And we often think we have to have all the answers before we go into a job. And clearly you're evidence that we don't.
No, we don't. And I've also been very blessed to be in these very male dominated environments, because they showed me that that's not how they do it.
Yeah.
And so I got to see, I'm like, well, if he could jump, why not me? Right? Why not me? And so, I am a very, very proud woman in business. I'm a very proud mother and wife. Like, I wear all those roles with equivalent pride. But it doesn't go without saying that I don't absolutely appreciate the impact that the men that I've worked with have had as my mentors, as my partners, as my direct reports. I mean, they have really helped shape me as much as the women have as well.
Which is great. No, and then I think that's a really important point. And I felt the same way in a lot of my career. Yes, I had women mentors or women who gave me guidance, but a lot of my guidance did come from the men in my life, whether it was my boss, whether it was from, male colleagues. And for us to be integrated whole people, holistic people, I think it's really important that we get those varying perspectives. I know, studies have shown that companies with both men and women on boards do much better than companies with just one or the other. It's not just, so that combination and really taking in the varying perspectives can really help shape our identities. And it sounds like you were really able to integrate a lot of things that you learned from both sexes into who you were, not only as a leader, but as a person.
Very much, because I also found that tapping in to my feminine energy served me as a leader. And I found that oftentimes when I was in a room with other women that were at the equivalent levels, I'll give you an example because it really blew my mind. I was at a women's conference, Women in Manufacturing. So it's nothing but incredibly powerful, talented, intelligent women. And we went into like kind of a breakout session, and one started talking about that night's upcoming football game. And then all of a sudden I could feel where everybody felt that they needed to contribute and keep the focus on a football game. Now, it may have been the first woman's genuine interest, but it was obviously not everybody's. And yet there was almost this idea that we need to talk about football because that's what the men would be talking about in this moment. And if we're really at their level, then we need to be behaving or talking or acting the way that they would in this moment. And that was a pivotal moment for me to say, I don't want to act and speak like any other gender, any other person. That's not genuine to me and who I am now. I love sports. I was a soldier. I like a lot of the guy stuff. But I am most effective when I don't run from the femininity that is a part of my nature. I found people draw close. They open up in ways that they might not have opened up before. They trust in ways that they may not have trusted otherwise. There's a closeness that I have maintained with my teams throughout the years. And it's evident because people that worked with me in 2008 are still very much in my life, whether it's through social media or emails or phone calls. I had somebody reach out on LinkedIn like 2 days ago saying, how's the best XO in the Army? And, I was an XO like 2007. So for him to say that today, I mean, I made an impact. I want to believe I made an impact in his life in that role because I didn't run from who I was. And I think that's one thing I would always tell women in business. Don't be ashamed to be feminine. It's part of our strength. It's part of our command presence as women.
Yeah. And I love that, because I think when I was coming up, because I think I'm a little older than you, I was coming up, it was harder to do that. You felt like you had to be one of the guys. And I always struggle with that. I saw some of the other women who were my seniors, who were sort of ahead of me, and they really were very focused on, kind of being one of the guys in a lot of ways. And well, I'm very much a tomboy. I always was a tomboy when I was a kid. I love football. So I can relate to men. I can have those conversations. But it's definitely something that's not always easy to do in the work environment, is to really access that authentic femininity in whatever way works for you.
Right. I don't think there's a standard way, just like, and it's funny because on the other side of the fence, I have seen these very impactful, powerful men that are amazing leaders. And I think a commonality that they have is they stay very true to themselves. And you see that authenticity in them, and you trust them, and you want to follow. And they're natural leaders. We have the same gift.
We do. It looks different for all of us, right? I'm sure if you took all of those guys, each one of their qualities and the way they present themselves is going to be different.
Of course.
So it's the same way for women. I know my husband and I laugh about this, but for a long time, he thought, like many men, you have to have long hair to be feminine, right?
Oh, I love it.
So I did. I mean, I will confess, I did. I kept my hair as long as it will go, which my hair does not grow. I mean, it's just
Kool-Aid.
I drank the Kool-Aid, and then finally one day I went, you know what? I'm done with this. I hate my hair like this. It's a pain in the neck to take care of. It's not designed to be long, right? My hair is not built to be long hair. Yeah. And so I just said, I'm getting it cut. So I went to the salon. I came home, I got it cut. Rita looked at me, he goes, wow, that haircut looks really great. Why didn't you get that cut a long time ago?
How validating and freeing.
How free. And we laugh about it because he's like, okay, I should have listened to you. But, he admitted, he had this preconceived notion about what this needs to look like. And when I really showed up as who I was, okay, this is who I am. And it's not, having short hair does not mean I can't be feminine.
That's right.
But we just laugh about it because we all get these preconceived notions about this is what being feminine looks like. And it is just as varied and open and empowering as all the different ways that men show up.
I agree. And I think that it took me a lot of years and a lot of hard knocks and moments, in tears in my office, trying to figure out how can I be the best at this? And it kept coming back to, you need to honor who you are. And that means that you are feminine and you do have an accent because, I learned Spanish at the same time I learned English in my house growing up. It was like both my dad.
Which is such a gift. I mean, that's such a gift.
But, and it's funny because when people would say, oh, you have an accent, I remember at first I would bristle like, it's come out. It has slipped out. I was supposed to tuck that away. And over the years, it's very much part of my identity, and I have embraced it to another level. And I'll share a little bit about that because in 2020, that was really a culmination year for me. So I finished at that point, my doctorate in business with a focus in international business. My experiences in Puerto Rico really drove that appetite to study international business. And COVID happened. I was building respiratory devices in a medical device factory at the time. So when the world was shutting down, I needed to ramp up like 3 shifts, 7-day a week, and then protect my team and all the employees in the factory who were terrified, and they couldn't understand why they were having to go to work and, just at 6 feet distance and build things. And it was really changing the mentality that just like the nurses and the doctors, these workers were the front line. They were the heroes.
They're saving people's lives. Yeah,
absolutely. Like all of the world needs you right now more than ever. And so getting through that, two of my kids, my high schoolers, graduated, like one in 2019 and one in 2020. And so I had one kid left who was getting ready to go into the 8th grade. My husband had retired from the Army. He was working as an information system security manager, so an ISSM with the Federal Information Systems. He had launched his company by himself about 7 months before, finished his first contract. And then we were kind of like, okay, this is one of these, you're standing at the corner of the stop sign, you can go left, you can go right, or you can walk straight. What are we going to do? And we went and took a walk at the park and sat on a bench, and in like 10 minutes, we figured out the plan that we were going to shut everything down, sell the house. I was going to leave the company, and we were heading home to Florida. Like after, for me, 20 plus years away from family, and for him to, be drawn near to his brother, like it just made sense. This was the time before our youngest child was going to start high school. Yeah, let's just do it. And so I got to Florida with no job, no idea what I was going to do. I went to school for 3 months to learn orthopedic and spinal reconstruction surgical procedures to learn how to sell devices. I built them for such a long time. So I was like, let me get some commercial sales experience and prepare myself for, executive level advancement by getting some commercial exposure. And, life has a funny way of laughing at your plans. And
yes, it does.
The week I was graduating, I was in like the top 3 of my class. I was the oldest person in that class. By the way, these were like all fresh, right out of college kids, wondering what in the world I'm doing in there. And I got an opportunity to run law firms. I had no idea that's what I'd be doing until the last stages of the interview, but I found out that they needed somebody to help set up KPIs and grow the business and create procedures in place for a law firm that was primarily based out of Puerto Rico. We ended up growing into the Philippines and joined up with a team in Utah. And so my scope grew very quickly, but I found myself back in Puerto Rico, flying to Puerto Rico 2 weeks out of the month, which is never a bad thing. Right?
Actually, I've never been to Puerto Rico, so now you're making me intrigued.
Well, the island has a way of just continuing to call me, and I always say yes when she does. So
that's
I spent a year doing that, and then my husband had reincorporated the company here in Florida, and he started to grow, and he was really at a point that he said, I have done everything that I can do, and now I need you to help me out. So it was, he had talked about us doing something from the time we got married in 2006. So it took, 15 years, but I finally jumped on board 16 years. And so in January of 2022, I joined him full time. I had been with the law firm for a year. They were actually downsizing. They were shifting things out of Puerto Rico, and it just made sense. I could just tell it was a moment of transition. So I joined my husband full time. I finished a novel that I had been working on for a couple of years, because that was another dream of mine, was to write fiction. And the last 2 years, I have dove headfirst into an entirely new industry once again, which is, government contracting, IT. That was just not something that I had studied or I had ever worked in.
That's a whole different world.
Yeah, an entirely different world. And thankfully, my husband and I are an incredible team, and he is the technical subject matter expert. IT and cyber is his passion. He studies it. He's got all the letters, all the certifications. He is happiest behind the computer doing his thing with the teams in Colorado and in Ohio. That's like his happy place. But it gave me an opportunity to really look at, okay, let me understand this industry and that is government contracting, because it's a beast and it's different. And it is also very male dominated. And there's not a lot of Latinas in that industry, which allows for a lot of wonderful opportunities that the government has, a lot of resources to help women like me grow a business. And in 2 years, we've bought a headquarter building in St. Cloud, Florida. We've, doubled our revenues from 2022 to 2023. We're now in the Department of Defense Mentor Protege program, which is a highly, highly competitive program that, companies are really chomping at the bit to be a part of. And when everybody told me there was no way we were going to get picked for that because we were small and we were new and we didn't have an established relationship with a large prime contractor, we did. We found it. And that, that opportunity came to pass when everybody said no. Our prime contractor, a wonderful company out of Fairfax, Virginia, said yes, and liked our story and liked what we were doing and believed in Mike and I and said yes. And so that just kicked off February 28th. And
yes, that's incredible. What an amazing story, and what a testament to your perseverance. I really feel like everything that you said, there's just this underlying thread of perseverance. And of course, I know what it takes to write a novel because I've written two, so we have to compare notes on that.
Yeah.
But that also is an exercise in perseverance.
Oh, yeah, especially because I went traditionally published. So, I am all about, when they tell me I can't, I will show you that I can, even if it kills me. No.
Oh, no, don't let it kill you. Come on.
No. But thankfully, nothing has yet. No. But I am, just to give you a few stats, because I love stats. So in business, for example, in business right now, and this is not well researched, and as a DBA, I should know better, but I'm just going to do it and say I Googled, and there is 2 Latina CEOs in the history of the Fortune 500. One right now, that's Priscilla Almodovar with Fannie Mae. She's the CEO for Fannie Mae. The only in 500 companies, one Latina CEO. We have less than 1% representation in the senior executive level. At the CEO level, we have less than 1%. We have 1.6% at the senior executive levels. So Latinas at the CEO, at the executive level, the percentages are just telling quite a story. And I feel very purposeful to say to all of these women, these incredible women that I've worked with, that I've seen, why not me? For them to ask themselves, why not me? And, I think there's a lot of traditionality, and, I have raised 3 beautiful daughters, and I've been a stepmother to 2 incredible sons, and I have 3 beautiful grandchildren, and I've been married for 18 years. So I understand the challenges of work, life, family, and you can still do it. You absolutely. And then writing a book. So for me to get an agent, I think it's like 5% of authors get an agent. Of those that get an agent, less than 1% are able to sell their manuscripts to the publishing house on the fiction side. And so not only did we sell my novel to Lake Union, an Amazon company that does book club fiction and contemporary fiction, but we sold it in about 6 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible because I decided not to go, of course I had another reason for publishing my book. So I decided not to go, that route, but I know that's not an easy route. So congratulations. That is absolutely incredible. So do you have a copy of your book with you?
No, our pub date is February 11th of 2025. So I sold it in September. And, the only thing I'm currently in the two slowest industries on the planet, government contracting and
publishing. Yeah, I know publishing is amazingly, which is one of the reasons I did not go that route, because I wanted to get my book out there because it's part of my business. I'm passionate about women's leadership. So my novels are about women's leadership, but I just wrote them as novels to make them more fun. Plus, that's how I think. I'm sort of like you. I grew up reading incessantly. I always had a book in my hand. And, I love the way that your story is coming around in that complete circle of, the little girl who loved to read, wanted to be a powerful woman that she was reading in the books. You are a powerful woman, and now you've not only that, but you've written your own novel. So that is, it's just a beautiful circle. Not that it's a complete circle, because obviously there's many places for you still to go, but that's just so inspiring and beautiful.
Well, and the funny thing is, this was on the fiction side. This was my third try. So I had written two that went into the drawer right away. And they needed,
it happens.
They needed to go in the drawer. They were practice rounds. But when my book is called At the Island's Edge. And when I sat down to write this one, I said, what am I missing that I have two strikes, right? So this is my last time at bat. Like, what do I need to do different to make this work? Because I do read a lot. I know what a good book sounds like, and mine are not working. So what is it? And I started to really dig deep, because I knew that I could communicate. The Army taught me that, business taught me that. So I picked a topic that I knew would not come from here. It would come from here.
Yes.
And so I wrote a story about an Army medic, a sergeant that is in Iraq. And she comes back from wartime a hero, even though she does not feel like one, because she's a healer. And she's a single mother to a disabled son. And so she decides to get out of the Army and go home to Puerto Rico after 12 years away, and go into a multi-generational household. And she's, not dealing with a lot of the things, her experiences. And she meets a veteran from Charleston, South Carolina, who's opened up a bar and grill in Puerto Rico. And he also served in the war, and he also lost a lot in the war. And yet his approach to the other side of this is very different than her approach. And so through her friendship with him and the experience of going home to this beautiful island and family and food and culture, and integrating her son into a family he didn't know, she heals from post-traumatic stress. And so this is like bringing all the things that I loved and that I felt very passionate about: women, the military, motherhood, the island, the Latino culture, the American culture, because, a lot of times these Latinx books, they're only oriented to the Latin community. Well, it's not my life. That's not my experience. I've had a lot of multiple different cultures that integrate. So I think
which is beautiful how you can, I love, and I'm, I guess, an American mutt, because my family has been here on both sides for as long as, since before the Civil War. So I am not, I'm sort of just an American mutt. I have no idea what most of my cultural background is. So, my culture is
everybody's
the American culture. And I love being able to, tap into, to experience other cultures. That's why I love to travel. And the fact that you are grounded in really, just the broader American culture, as well as your, Latina culture, is just so beautiful, because it gives you so many opportunities to integrate and grow and learn more. I mean, that's why I love to travel, is love to learn more about other cultures. So that's beautiful.
It's thanks to the Army too. Because of the Army, we lived in South Carolina and we lived in Ohio, and I worked and spent a lot of time in Minnesota, and I lived in Philadelphia. And so I just had this beautiful opportunity to meet people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, and I'm fascinated by all of them. And so when I'm telling some of the stories that I know from, my culture growing up, and even, my mother on the Irish side, like some of the influences there, I mean, it's just, I think that's what makes things more interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it adds so much nuance and richness to our experiences.
Yeah. And it shows how similar they often are, more similar than we realize. We think, well, that's just how we are, but no, there's a flavor of it.
Oh,
across the board.
People are people. I mean, at our core, we are all humans, and our experiences are similar. They're not the same. They shape us, but ultimately the human experience is the human experience, and cultures across the centuries have experienced similar things and responded to them in similar ways. So
right.
It's really what it makes the beautiful tapestry of our world work together, which which I just love. And I love when we can be open to that experience and not judge it, right? To just, be open and accepting of it and not judgmental, which I love, which clearly you are. So
yeah, no, and I hope that's when somebody sees my book on the shelf, this one or the future books, that's what they'll know. They're getting a hodgepodge of different culture and experience, and a lot of inclusivity.
Well, I can't wait to read your book, so I will look forward to it when it comes out. Maybe we'll have to. Maybe we'll have to read yours. Yeah, well, you should check them out. Those two are on Amazon, and I'm working on the third. Mine's a trilogy, so I'm working on the third one.
Wonderful. Congratulations. It is not easy.
It is not easy, and it's, to your point, it was learning a different set of skills, though, because writing fiction is not the same as writing business stuff.
Right.
At all. Yeah. But anyway, well, I don't want to keep you too long today. This has just been such a fun conversation, and I was so happy that you joined me today, Cherisa. And why don't you tell people if they want to get in touch with you and ask you questions or connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. So our website, www.ashiretech, all one word, .com, is probably the quickest and easiest way to reach me. Our contact information is also on the webpage. I'm on social media. If you're interested in the books, it's c.i.Jerez, Jerez. So if you do a Google search under C.I. Jerez, you'll find I'm broadening. I'm in TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Threads. I'm going for it.
So you're going for it. All right.
Well, definitely on LinkedIn too.
Okay, well, we will look forward to connecting with you. And of course, all the information will also be in the show notes on the YouTube page. So please check it out and connect with Cherisa and learn more about her story. And don't forget to buy her book when it comes out in February. So I'm Karen Ann Bulluck. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss another one of these wonderful interviews. And if you'd like to learn more about me and my work and my theories about leadership, I have a new masterclass that's available on my website. You can grab that for free. So look forward to talking to you soon. See you next time.